Took all the main institutions, ports, roads, checkpoints, and never said anything. They just took it over. Absolutely nobody knew what to do about it, because it was actually a completely new strategic operation where you basically invade and say you didn't.
Get down, get down.
It was absolute chaos. It had been a very Russian-style attack. The way Russia became involved in the Ukraine crisis was an indicator of how they could exert influence. Ukraine was a guinea pig for what they can do elsewhere, be it direct military action, be it media manipulation. Could it be the Baltics? Could it be any of the old Soviet states that are wanting to go westwards? You have an uprising that starts in Kiev against a government that was clearly refusing to follow what appeared to be the will of the people, and that the alignment of much of Ukraine with Western thinking, following into the European Union, was being denied to them. And so they took to the streets in a very, very violent way. Freezingly bitter cold weather, standing and fighting against police special forces who were shooting people fairly indiscriminately to impose the will of the government back on them, which ultimately they failed to do. I hadn't seen anything like it because it was sort of medieval in the way it was being fought in. Fighting against a fully weaponized police unit.
At the start, when you first turned up, you're trying to process it. That's when you really grasp, actually, fine, they might be fighting for something here, but there has actually been bodies and lives lost.
And one of the arguments that came from both the government that was slowly collapsing and from Moscow that they were all fascists and it was a sort of right-wing conspiracy to turn it into a neo-Nazi state. And at exactly that time, the propaganda that came from Moscow, which was, they're a bunch of fascists, they're going to come down and take away your Russian, many of whom do speak Russian in the East. They're going to burn your churches, and they're going to rape your children, and they are on their way, there's hordes coming. It was a media-controlled sort of load of nonsense, but it got more and more entrenched into the thinking. Till in the end, the people of Donbass, the East, began to think we really are under attack.
Those rallies started. I don't think it will burst out into anything, because, well, usually our region was stable.
Russia! Alexander, our producer, he was saying to me, Stuart, this just doesn't happen. And we were saying, no, it really is happening. This is an uprising. Then there was an anti-Eastern rally. They arrived in buses and got absolutely smashed by the Russian supporters. And then they started taking over government buildings, setting up their own sort of independent republic of Donbass. Well, this is the latest government building that's been taken over by the pro-Russian militia. It's interesting, they won't actually tell you what they're doing. It's quite clear that they've taken over the offices, but they won't engage at all. However, they're quite happy for you to film. And I think that's very much the point of this. They're trying to get over this propaganda message, if you like, that they can take over these type of buildings at will. Without doubt, Moscow was fueling the fire. Control of the media, the propaganda was absolutely deliberate. The relations between the eastern Donbass part of Ukraine and Russia are very, very tight. They speak Russian naturally.
You know, that's what all you saw, all you heard was Russian speaking, Russian flag. It was Russia for me, not Ukraine.
We are pro-Russian. We want, be close to Russia. No one said that openly that we want to be inside Russia or something. We just want to be close.
As an entity, they just wanted to have their own values protected. And it sort of like slowly snowballed into this thing, well, actually, yeah, there's a Ukrainian army coming, we're going to get attacked. Yes, but that wasn't really why they were coming. They were actually coming to try and stop the incursion into the country of Russian soldiers. All the time, soldiers wearing green uniforms, the little green men that we were later to see in Crimea, they were already arriving there as well. At the same time, only a few hundred miles away, the Russians were actually taking over Crimea. Putin just said, I'm having that back. Before we even start anywhere else, that's coming back. They just took over. The Russian army came in and took over Crimea. They dressed completely different to anyone seen before, and they simply refused to engage with you to explain it. They took all the main institutions, ports, roads, checkpoints, and never said anything. They just took it over. But they were pretty serious. I mean, you know, you'd have to be pretty stupid to have a go at them. Absolutely nobody knew what to do about it. Certainly no government in the West actually had ever seen anything like this, because it was actually a completely new strategic operation where you basically invade and say you didn't. And you continue to say you're not, even though the guys are special forces, even to the point where it's so clear that they are Russian soldiers, they say, well, then they're just off-duty Russian soldiers. Utterly absurd. It was organized, it was pre-planned, they were waiting for a time to do it, and I suspect that what Russia wanted to do was to see what it could do to push back. It's very, very clever. It's sort of unsubtle, but incredibly subtle at the same time. The various Ukrainian military bases slowly but surely fell. But one was left, and it was one base. And we decided to go into the base to have a look.
This was very early on in my career. You know, I felt like something was going to happen, but to be honest, I had no idea. And I said, why aren't they letting us out? And Stuart said, we're not going out. And I said, why? He said, basically, you know, we're in here because we're protecting them at the moment.
It was quite clear something was going on, right? They were the last ones. And we could see tanks, APCs, slowly growing in number.
Troops kind of all up on the hills, scoping it out, really. Turned to Stuart and he said, you see that vehicle moving? And I said, yeah.
I'll bet you it just comes through the wall.
I laughed. He said, no, I'm not joking. So I quickly picked my camera up.
He said, where am I aiming? Where am I aiming? I said, just aim at that corner, it's coming through.
It came straight through the wall.
All of the Ukrainian soldiers put anything they'd been carrying on the floor immediately, hands in the air, and everyone, all the media started running around.
Get down.
It was absolute chaos.
Blast bombs. Okay, these are blast bombs. I think they're coming in. The Russians have stormed the base.
They came straight over to me and tried to push the lens down. They were very aggressive towards us. They didn't want us filming. I was shaking. I'd never done anything like this before.
Oh, it's as scary as hell. I mean, you know this is happening, you know these are soldiers, and you know they're shooting. And my concern was that the Ukrainian army would actually do something stupid like try to protect themselves, because they were just going to get killed straight away, but we could all get killed with them. Ultimately, when they come to the wall, you put your hands in the air and hope they don't shoot. You run around for a bit, but when you realise that wherever you look, there's another guy with a gun pointed at you, there's nothing you can do but put your hands in the air and say, I hope they don't shoot me.
But it was a very slick operation. I don't think they were going in there ready to kill. They were just wanting to overtake and make their point.
Debaltseve was really a place that nobody had ever heard of. It was of no real value to anyone. It was a siding, I think, effectively on a massive railway track. But it became a holdout strong point for Ukrainian military as they were surrounded by a massive number of Russian-backed rebels. This was a proper battle, fighting everywhere. It had been a very Russian-style attack. which is grad missiles just piling in, give up or retreat and leave.
There is a hope that the taking of Debaltseve would lead to a lull in the fighting and a ceasefire. Well, it doesn't feel like it here. This seems very much like an army on the move.
The Ukrainian army eventually got out under cover of darkness and lost loads of men.
I'd never seen destruction like it.
People had been killed, there's no doubt about that. There were bodies in ditches.
And you could tell very quickly that this wasn't a mercenary or Russian-backed separatist job. This was a proper job. There was a truck coming up towards me, big military lorry. And as it came up and passed me, I looked behind, and the bloke was just kicking bodies off. Quite literally just kicking Ukrainian bodies off, and he got it kind of just by my feet. First time I'd ever seen a dead body, so my mouth went to the floor. That's when I kind of grasped, yes, it was a small town, but the Ukrainians probably put up a hell of a fight. The same truck, they've got a guy with a stomach injury. And I took kind of one look at him, and he was dying. But they were very quick to put him on the floor, slap him about a bit, and get me over to film it.
Who is this guy? Why is he there? Is he part of the Ukrainian forces? He is an alleged spy, whatever.
Slap, intimidate him, everything.
Sometimes you're sort of just there. It was hardcore.
When you're in those situations, if anything, we usually get told not to film. But these Russians wanted to intimidate this bloke. They wanted to embarrass him. And I felt bad. Fine, it was great shots and it told the story, but I didn't feel, I knew that guy didn't really deserve that. He was fighting for somewhere he probably lived his whole life.
Russia has used Ukraine's differences between its east and west as a guinea pig to work out how it can actually do anything, with no obvious solution in sight whatsoever.
I don't see any side willing to make a first step or to somehow resolve the situation.
They've never got over NATO expansion, and Putin's ambition is to make sure that those who used to belong to the club remain in the club and don't go and join another one. We will become great again, even if it means being outside of international norms of a welcome state, even if it takes a decade.